That's going to be a weird talk where half of the audience is Anshar Studios. Question is if we scaled up right or not. We'll see. Hey, hello, my name is Łukasz Hacura. I'm a CEO of Anshar Studios, recently also a CEO of Anshar Publishing. And today I'll be talking about growth pains, how to scale up in game dev. Now, why do I think I have something to contribute on the topic? I work in video game industry for 15 years, but I think that relevant for this talk is my last 9 years at Anshar Studios, where we co-founded it in 2012. We started with 4 people, and the budget of our first full SKU production was around $100,000 US. Right now we are around 120 people, and our full SKU budgets right now are around $4 million. So we definitely scale up, and we definitely did it in pain. Although the effects are nice, we have a couple of nice things in our portfolio. Recently we released our own isometric RPG called gamedev, and we grew the last 50 people, around 50 people, we grew inside COVID, which also gives quite a unique perspective on things. Okay, disclaimer, a lot of things that I'm saying about here are super relevant to me and to Anshar Studios. And while I think that there be interesting points here that anybody can take away to their own companies, always remember that context is king. If it worked for me or didn't work for me, doesn't mean it will work for you. So always try to understand how my context applies to your context. And also remember that survivor bias in our industry is a strong one. We look to extreme failures, we look to extreme successes, and we say this, oh, this is where our industry is taking us, etc. Always think about all the thousands of decisions or things that are happening that we don't know about. So I'm only a single data point here. And now when I already used 2 best sci-fi IPs in my memes, I can move forward. Okay, so the structure of this talk is that I will mention 11 things, because everybody mentions 10 things. So I will mention 11 things, because this is what I came up with, which affected our company differently on different size tiers. And I personally feel that we're around 121, if you include Anshar Publishing and other stuff that we're doing. In one building, there's around 130 people. Then I honestly think that there are 4 tiers up to 10. I don't know what's next. I hope I will never find out. From the talks with my friends from like Sperasoft or Saber Interactive, they say that the next point comes in between 350, 500, that everything changes again. So what I mean by it is that if you run a company of 10 people in the same way you run a company of 50 people, you are doing something seriously wrong, because the mechanisms that worked at one point stop working, or they require serious adjustments. There are things that so during those 9 years, I didn't learn how to run a company. I am learning how to run a company for the 4th time, okay? So first I learned how to run around a 10-person company, then around 30, around 50, and then 100 plus. Obviously, depending on the charisma of the leader, the know-how of the founders, their background, if it's more managerial, more business, those numbers can get skewed. Some things you can get away with let's say 50 people structure in an 80 people company, right? But at one point or another, it will fail if you don't change, adapt to the new circumstances. So first thing I wanted to talk about is mission. So this is something that we created around 5 years ago. started to communicate clearly around 5 years ago, so 4 years after founding of Anshar. So for 4 years, we were a company doing stuff, which makes things really hard to recruit, communicate, and create a culture inside a company if you don't have a clearly established mission and vision and values that you have inside your company. Because you cannot even say, why are we doing what we're doing? Because the answer is, well, we're making games and you want to sell them. Oh, that's unique. And it's very hard to appeal to somebody without saying what is unique about us, what are we trying to achieve. Why is it worthwhile to work for us aside from the fact that we're paying you? Because if the only reason you're working for us is we're paying you, you're going to leave for the next $200. If somebody's going to offer you $200 more, you're going to leave because that's the only reason you're working for us. So what we're doing the way we're doing it is we're defining a strategy that has its consequences that I'm going to talk about. And so the strategy is how are we doing things. The mission is why we're doing things. And at the end, we say, what are we doing? So when I say we're a company that does AA RPGs, for example, that's not a mission because there's no why in it. I'm going to show you an example, I'm going to very briefly go through Anshar Studios' mission to give you just an example. So we start with why, is that we believe that video games are in a place where we can talk about different things and more complex subjects. It's not only about adrenaline or dopamine injection to our audience, although it's still cool. We believe that we are our own medium, so the uniqueness of the fact that we're an interactive medium allow us to shape the narrative by interacting with the video game, not just to hear the writing, the voiceovers, or a cutscene. And when we take those two things, we then find a way to express that, and we say, okay, for us, the way we want to express that is by creating AA premium RPG titles with maximum creative freedom on our side. And this is how I can explain, for example, why are we fine with doing ports, for example. Anshar Studios for a long time did porting jobs, right? Well, no, we're not. Or are we fine with doing a job for a publisher for their money when the creative direction is on our side, but it's not our title really, because it's a publisher title? Yeah, we're fine with that. So there's something that we can bump off that, hey, this is our course, so are we making good or bad decisions based on that course? So that's the whole idea. And I personally think that we did it too late. And we did it too late because those 4 years in, we were around 30 people. When I gave a speech 4 years ago, I think, or 5 years ago at Digital Dragons, that, yeah, we have a mission, I'm so happy about it, we're 34, I think. So the thing is that you don't necessarily need it before because you're there. There's 40 people. You can talk with everybody on the coffee, in the corridors. You can project your own belief system and, hey, this is what I want to do, and you can talk about it. And it doesn't need to be very structured. You don't have it printed out. You don't need to convey it in a very special way because you're there in the trenches with the team. But when you have 50 or 100 people, it's impossible. Like, you're not going to talk with everybody. You're not going to talk with everybody in a similar amount of time. It's just impossible. And usually the reason that we say, hey, this is such a big company, it's very corporate right now, like nobody really knows each other, et cetera, it's that we don't use mechanics to actually steer everybody in the same direction. And mission is one of those things that you can use. And when you have a mission, the second thing is conscious culture forming, because every company is unique, right? Every company is, for example, I don't need to explain super hard to somebody in Polish game industry what Carbon Studios are about, right? We know it's a VR company, right? It's something. It's a specific thing what they do, right? There's the Destructive Creation company. They're very particular, right? So there are companies, that have that thing, but the bigger you are, the harder it is to be a very concrete something, to be that unique thing, and you need to consciously support that in order not to lose it. So, what are our values? What it means to be part of a company? You need to, you don't create culture. You don't say, from now on, our culture at the company is to do something. That doesn't work that way. You create culture by consistency of behaviors, right? So this is the way we do things at our company. And if you consistently do it, you create a culture, and then you can spread it that, hey, this is the way we do things at our company. And the bigger you are, the gossiping, the misunderstandings, they're like freaking cancer. I hate them, right? So for example, when we had a, let's say, 30-person company, I really liked the fact that people integrated drink coffee. And I really like the fact that people integrated having a cigarette and going to bars, etc. I fucking dread it now. I really do, right? Because they are not forwarding the actual information. They're often forwarding misinformation, and there's a lot of gossip, and it's a conscious effort to straighten this out. So what we do at Anshar, we have a thing called Anshar Day, which we'll be having next week. We usually have it once a quarter. It's a gathering of the entire company. When I do my introduction, indoctrination speech, and when I convey the mission and the culture and everything, and then I subject myself to a very gruesome Q&A where employees know that they can ask me anything. I also dread that, but it's a good cleanser. And because we do multiple projects, this is also a place where teams can share what projects are we working on, what's happening in other teams. It's a way to show that, hey, we're a singular company, not 4 different projects, for example. One-on-ones, there was or is gonna be, I'm sorry, I don't know, but on the agenda there was a one-on-one speech here by Jan Cieślar on GIC. It's an underutilized tool in game dev from my perspective, but the fact that you have a direct access to your direct manager, and on regular intervals you have a talk where you can discuss your current situation in the company, what are the problems, what are the things, that you're not only discussing project problems, but also other problems. Executive reviews is something that we introduced around when I stopped being a producer at all projects. So basically, it's like this kind of a summary when the teams try to summarize to the executives of the company what is happening in the projects. We do it usually once a month, maybe once every 2 months, actually. We should be doing it once every month. And I personally, with my directors, I have monthly tacticals and quarterly strategicals. So every month we meet and discuss things that are happening at the company, what are the problems in the departments, and once every quarter we meet on the offsite and we discuss the strategy things and where we want to go with the company, etc. So long story short, it's you can do it alone in a 10 or 30 people company because you are the part, and you can transfer that directly to the employee, and he or she can talk back at you and you can discuss it. Now when you have a 50 or 100 person company, you need to do that with a smaller amount of people, like directors, leads, whatever, and they need to convey that lower, right? And I know that hierarchy, we are an industry that likes flat structures, etc. But in that way, in this instance, you cannot escape the need for hierarchy in conscious culture forming. Okay, the next thing that I just want to skim, because this definitely deserves a totally separate talk in what are the production pipelines, and this is not a production talk. What are the production pipelines on different sizes of the team, what kind of software tools we can use. how progress is measured, how do we break down the development phases, what are the gates, do we have a pre-production, do we have a procedure for cancellation of the project with the pre-production, or are we pre-producing and prototyping indefinitely until the money runs out, or whatever. There are millions of things to consider just with gates and development phases. Do we estimate, or how we estimate tasks? Do we think that estimates are deadlines, or they are actually estimates? This is not R&D or whatever. There are a lot of things in production pipelines, and there are a lot of systems, both on the actual hard, like software size, like, hey, we use Hack and Plan, we use Jira, or we use Scrum, or whatever else, Kanban. But the thing is that you always have production pipelines, but the complexity of the production pipelines increases. Like for example, you can use Shotgun for, as a system for art creation inside a company, right? But it doesn't make any sense to use it when you have 3 artists on the team. What kind of continuous integration do you use, etc. You don't even need to have a producer in a team when you're 10 people, but you have a lot of production work that is just distributed between other members, right? Like leads or a founder or a CEO or whoever. Somebody is doing the production work, even if it's not a named producer. But as I said, this is a separate topic that should be addressed by, I don't know, for example, at Anshar by Magda Cielecka, our head of production, or whoever else. It deserves a separate talk. Administration is a good one. How much it changes when you scale up the company. Because administration right now at Anshar Studios is you have hard HR. So basically all the things regarding the agreements with the employees and all the paperwork regarding hiring people and employing them. You have office management, sometimes called front desk, people who make things run smoothly in the office. You have accounting, which at first is usually external. Then at one point you think, hey, maybe it would be more cost effective to have actually an internal accounting team. Somebody needs to clean the office. Sometimes it comes in the package with the office. Usually it's shitty, so usually you hire a custom cleaning service. We even have a handyman at Anshar Studios. I never thought in a million years that I will work at a video game company that actually employs a handyman. But when you own a lot of office space, things break down, things need fixing, and it's just super handy to have a handyman. And we also have a projects office. This is a projects office is a very prestige name for Kamil, who who handles our project, like for example, research and development projects from co-financed by the European Union and etc. Right? So the bigger you are the company, you're going to look for opportunities. Even small companies look for those opportunities where you can get some financial help from government institutions, basically. And now, you technically could have, somebody's taking care of it, right? We were in such a good situation that we had like 3 co-owners working at the company, because it was me, Chris, and Gregory. So we split a lot of those responsibilities between us for the first years, and usually that's how it is. Everything is on the founder or the founders. But in time, you usually hire this one person that does, it's usually called office manager at around 30, sometimes earlier. And officially it's an office manager, but that person does everything, right? And usually is super overworked. And then at one point you're scaling the administration. And I'm going to mention the consequences of that when I'm going to go to the controlling point. So the another point is infrastructure, and that is something that I actually envy indies in that sense, that right now it's super nice to set up an infrastructure for a couple of people, and it's a nightmare to do it for 100. But by infrastructure, what I mean is, first of all, what kind of software are we using? How much does it cost? And what is the licensing? And there is a shitload of good licensing deals for 5 people company, 3 people company, 10 people company, right? But at some point, those companies need to earn, and you go out of that range. Let's say, for example, you earn more than $200,000 a year, or you employ more than 10 people. Usually there are clauses in the software, and suddenly inside, let's say, an X amount of PLNs for an artist, we spend 0.3 X PLNs just for software for that artist monthly, right? For example. So software is a big overhead, and choosing the software wisely, at what licenses and in what way is it utilized in big corporations, especially even at Anshar Studios sometimes. We have problems like we have 20 licenses of something, and we pay for every license, let's say $10, right? It doesn't seem like a big deal. But when you think about it, and out of those 20 licenses, 17 are, you see that 17 are unused, it hurts that you're spending $170 basically down the drain a month. And trust me, in big companies, those things happen all the time and would never happen at a 10-person company, right? IT. I once was on a lunch with Larian, and I said that we have an IT guy. It was before they bought like all the studios and scale up, and they were like, you have IT? So who does IT in game dev? Programmers do, right? So the most expensive, one of the most overworked and valuable resources in game development, we spend their time, fixing like, oh, you have insert pressed. Great job. So yeah, it usually it's like this at a small company, but the bigger you are, the bigger the problem comes with the fact that computers break down, people don't know how to use software, there are licensing issues. Things from last week, the fans are loud at the computers, right? For example, that's because something's wrong with the fan in the computer, we don't know what. So you need to have an IT person. And not to mix those two things up, super important and super tied into production pipelines are DevOps. There is a good chunk of a job, especially in this day and age, where we work on multiple SKUs. Like back in the day, you could, and there were companies, maybe then even there is maybe one company, I don't know, that works on a single platform. Like, hey, we do only games on PlayStation, right? Like, for example, we're Naughty Dog and we're doing only games for PlayStation. But most companies do multiple SKUs on multiple platforms. And usually it's developed, the bigger the company, the more usual approach is that you do not outsource the porting, but you actually do it in-house. And you do it simultaneously from one point with your development. So right now when you have like Stadia, Luna, PrefGens, CurrentGens, Switch, PC is Windows Store, Epic, GOG, and Steam, suddenly you're working on a project that has like 12 SKUs. And you have a DevOps system that makes builds on those platforms and runs daily builds and runs milestone builds or whatever. And who does the DevOps on the team? The programmer. And suddenly you have a 5-programmer team, let's say, on a project, and you have one full-time programmer working as a DevOps, actually. I mean, you still pretend that that person is a programmer, but actually it's a dedicated DevOps person, and usually it's super frustrating for that person. Because those things, the bigger you are and the more SKUs you work on, those things don't work out of the box. They always break down, and they always need maintenance. I mean, they're super useful, don't take me wrong, but they require constant maintenance and constant adjusting. So it's super good to have a dedicated DevOps to do that. That's one of the things that do not work at Anshar Studios well, because, for example, right now we do have dedicated DevOps, but we have still too many projects, and although they help and do an amazing job, still there is a lot of work that is done by the internal programming team. I heard rumors that Techland has it really well covered, so maybe we'll get there one day. Another thing is security. 2 years ago, exactly here at GIC, my email account was spoofed. And somebody had access to my email for 24 hours, and that was fucking scary. That's an example of things that can happen when you grow. Obviously, when you're small, this is usually neglected. It's like, what the worst thing we can happen? We have backups, right? Everybody has backups. At least in the industry, the idea of backups is not something that you need to pitch. But security, like double authentications on your emails, or using VPNs, or procedures that you have inside of the company. Anshar Studios works on IPs, and everybody who works on IPs knows that you work on some heavy NDAs, right? So even at a small company, but working on an IP, this can be an issue. And then I mentioned the insert button. It's more like even help desk than IT work, right? So it's a lot of things. And that looks like a bug, sorry. I don't know what I meant. Oh, no, I meant office, infrastructure, office. Okay, sorry, office. There is a lot of work with the office. With renovating things, with when you grow, you constantly need space. When you grow, it's constantly too tight, you know? You have like 20 people inside 50 square meters, right? It's absolutely horrible. Never happened to us, but I heard stories. So you constantly need to, for example, a couple of weeks ago, we had to add 2 kitchens. One kitchen was 150 square kitchen was too small, so we need to set up a new kitchen. And setting up a new kitchen with 2 fridges, with microwaves, and with everything, it's not zero zloty, right? So and then supporting the infrastructure, cleaning it, etc. So the bigger you are, obviously, remote work changes the office thing, but the rest, especially the software, the help desk, the IT, shipping computers, fucking nightmare in remote work, right? And then you ship a computer, it goes 2 days to somebody, they say that it doesn't work, they send it back, and there goes a week of work of somebody. Happened to us more than I'm willing to admit. So obviously, a couple of people sitting in the same room, you're not going to have a custom IT person. Somebody's going to take care of it, probably the programmer. You're not going to have DevOps, etc., right? But at some point, you're going to understand that those costs, that having programmers do that is too costly, and you're going to hire people, and that's going to generate overhead. It's going to theoretically increase your efficiency inside a project, but it's always magically sucked up by the project. So it's just an overhead, suddenly. Don't know how it works, but it works this way. Another thing is legal. Legal is easy and fast. You have agreements with your employees, you have agreements with your clients, and you do different business-to-business things like middlewares, etc. Usually very few people in the industry, especially in our sizes. I think it might be one of those things when you have 350, don't have an in-house lawyer working on those things. Usually you set up good agreements once with somebody on a retainer or whatever, then there's some maintenance of it, but usually you have an external legal partner that helps you on this, but this is something that you need to think about. Also agreements with the freelancers. We use a lot of outsource. Usually not companies who are not big enough or not maybe budgeted big enough to work with a big outsourcing B2B partners, but we work with a lot of freelancers. You also need to have that legal covered. Now, our approach was always, what is the risk associated with that agreement, right? Like, for example, an agreement with Steam poses zero risk in a sense that you're not going to negotiate an agreement with Steam, so you don't need to hire a legal advice to do that, right, for example. But for example, you're signing a deal with a publisher, I would definitely hire legal advice, right? So the bigger you are, the more things, because at first we were hiring our legal help on a task-based basis, and that's usually how you do when you're like 10 people or 30 people. But at one point, the amount of things that you do, you have a constant, it's called, I think, on a retainer or whatever, but you have a legal advice that you can always reach to. And you guessed, it generates overheads. Top management. That's the first really tricky one. And I think that we still have most of the problems there. Now, what do I mean by top management? Most Polish companies, I don't know that much external companies, but most Polish companies cease to exist. I mean, they will go bankrupt inside 6 months or less if the founder has gone missing, right? That's just the reality. And that's not healthy for the company, and definitely not healthy for the founder. And the reason for that is that we are super accustomed to promoting people to lead position, whatever the fuck that means, because it's never clearly defined in most companies. But you're not a director. You're not a director at a 30-person company. Come on. You're a lead, right? Like a lead artist, a lead designer, a lead programmer. Now, the problem with that is that middle management is not the same thing as top management, because top management makes decisions, right? And in a 10-person company, usually, the founders make the decisions. So you have leads that usually have expertise in a particular field, like, for example, they're amazing programmers or amazing artists, amazing designers, and they advise you well, and then you make a decision. And it happens for years. There's 10 of you, the same thing. 20 of you, the same thing. 30 of you, the same thing. 50 of you, the same thing. And then when there's 80 of you, and there's just too many decisions and too much of context building for you to make a sensible decision, what happens? You say, okay, you make the decision. You're a director now. I create you as a top management. You're a director. You're making the decision. That person has no fucking clue how to make a decision, because that person did not make any decision for the last, let's say, 5 years of your scaling up. That's a huge problem. And that's one of the issues that we had, because we started working on our top management when there was 80 of us. And it was a horrible time, a little bit still is, horrible time in my life where I saw that I cannot be everywhere, but things are not happening if I'm not there. And obviously people, well, I know that you're busy, but things aren't happening because you're not doing your job, right? So just saying that somebody is a director is not a good thing. We need to give those people training. We need to educate over a period of time. It takes time. I would say that it's starting to work at Anshar, and we started to think about it 1.5 years ago. So it took us 1.5 years, and it's still not ideal. And right now things are happening without me, which I'm super happy about, right? So when you start thinking about top management, when you need the top management, it's too late. I should have been thinking about it when we were around 50. That's one thing. Okay, another if you are a company that's working on multiple projects, more than one project, that's a prerequisite. If you want to just take away one thing from this speech, take this one, controlling. Remember that word. So when you have finances, you have like accounting, you have taxes, and you have the audit, and there's the fourth branch, which nobody knows about, apparently, in game development, and that is controlling. So what is controlling? Controlling is identifying what is your cost structure, are you profitable, and showing you what are the areas you can improve on per project, per overhead, per actual data that is not accounting data, because accounting data is not the same thing as controlling, right? You can theoretically set up your accounting to support your controlling, but controlling is its own thing. And it can support your budget projection. And okay, I obviously didn't want to share my business intelligence slide. So this is just a random photo from the internet. But it shows you, right? It shows you, okay, so we spent this much on this project. This part of the cost were the overheads that this project took upon themselves from the budget, right? You first need to define how do you divide overheads, what are the overheads, what are the project's costs, etc. But once you define it, once you create this is a Power BI, a Microsoft tool for business intelligence. So actually maybe scratch that, forget the controlling, Google business intelligence tools and use that, okay? Or hire somebody to do that for you. In a small company, you can do it with Excel, with minimal training if you understand what it's about. But most companies in Poland, I don't know why, especially small, don't freaking do it. And I understand when you're doing one project, that's quite okay, let's say, because you just look at your account. Okay, it's plus. That's my income. It's not that simple because still there's cash flow, taxes, etc. But it's easier for one project. That's also the reason why the movie industry sometimes creates a company just for one movie, because then they exactly know how much that movie costed the entire company, because all the costs and earnings come from that one company. So I'm not necessarily saying that if you have 4 projects, just start 4 companies. Maybe that's not the best way, but you need to be able to say, because I bet that everybody who doubts me right now, they're thinking something like this. I know what's my cost structure. I know the programmers are more expensive, or this or that, or wasting money or that. No, you probably don't know. You probably don't know. You're probably going to get surprised if you actually look at the data. The people who say that they know where they're losing money are the same people who say, I know what my players want, and never look at the analytics. Those are the same people, okay? So business intelligence, use it. It's an awesome tool, and it definitely changed a lot of things at Anshar. Forgot to change. So yeah, business intelligence. It helps us with yearly budgeting. So we do yearly budgeting, and every quarter we try to update the budget, the current budget, and the budget projections. It's a little bit different for us because we work on milestones as a work-for-hire company. So at a company that's just doing a project and is burning money, it's actually easier, and like Excel files should probably be fine for that, right? But again, if you're doing one project and you're a fairly small company. And on the executive reviews that I mentioned previously, our producers try to update the current plans for the project and the budget for the project so that they're feeded to the BI. So I'm watching at the actual real data, that this is our projections, this is our actual burn rate, this is not like accounting data, which is sometimes not connected to the reality depending on the things you're doing, not getting into that. But basically you're looking at real data. We have, like, for example, monthly timesheets where people record that, hey, I work it. Producers do that, but okay, that person worked for a month in that project, and then that person worked for a month on that project. And so we're working on real data, not just my imagination about who works for who. So obviously you're not going to buy an expensive tool when you're a 10-person company, but please learn Excel, and please do the budgets and controlling of your expenses. Human resources. So what are human resources in difference to the administration and to the hard HR that I mentioned previously? So it's employee branding and recruitment, obviously. So you do that for purposes of, you know, half of the audience, half the Anshar Studios blouse. That's employee branding, for example, right? So human resources handle employee branding and recruitment. They're also, a new term I learned, they're also business partners. And by business partner, I mean that they should handle the plan for a career of a person, and try to adhere to the problems a particular person has inside a company. Now, usually, leads do that at gamedev. Usually, leads do that, or in a small companies, founders do that. The problem is that because we usually promote specialists to leads, they have zero training and zero understanding how to create an actual career plan and how to actually talk with their employee, with their direct reports. So a dedicated HR person can handle that, and the bigger your company is, the onboarding is getting more and more important, because the bigger the company is, the harder there is for a new person to get injected inside of the company. So basically showing the ropes for a person. We struggled with that also for actually many years. People were like, okay, so after 3 weeks in the company, I finally know what projects do I work on, who's my direct manager, I have my computer and everything works fine, but I just wasted basically 3 weeks, for example, looking on documentation, right? That's a bad onboarding system. Obviously, in a small company, you're not gonna, founder's gonna do that, or lead's gonna do that. You could theoretically think about it in a medium-sized company like 50, but right now we don't have an HR person, and believe me, we need one. We have huge problems because of the fact that I am technically the only HR. Like, I'm a head of studio, right? So I'm the first HR of the company, and that's a nightmare with many things. Okay, middle management. So middle management is tricky because most companies have it, and they transfer it later into top management. So when you're a small company and you have a really strong founder, that's fine. So you can have specialist leads, and that works. But then it starts to break down where you're trying to build a structure that between you and somebody, there's more than one layer. So right now at Anshar Studios, it's me, there are directors, then there are leads, and there's the specialists, right? So there's 2 layers between us. And the informations get sometimes really skewed, and most things usually break in the middle because we don't actually train people to become leads. And in most cases, we promote best specialists to be leads without their adherence to their communication skill, the willingness to do it, etc. It's often also a problem that in companies, it's the only way to actually progress inside a company. So just another interesting tidbit that I wanted to show you. It's from the books called 9 Lies About Work. I really recommend that. So those are the 8 questions that a good direct manager should be able to ask their direct reports. And if the majority, and if there are a lot of no questions and no answers there, it means that we have a real problem with how that employee feels at a company and is probably burning out and probably sooner or later is going to leave. I'm not going to go through those. There are materials on that in the internet from that book, but I really recommend 9 Lies About Work, and I really recommend those 8 questions. How do people actually value? It's not the pay, if it's fair. It's not the pay, it's not the fruits, it's this. This is what is interesting for people. So a lead should focus on that. And again, by middle management, by definition, I mean somebody that's in the middle between a director and a specialist. So obviously you're not going to have that in, let's say, the first 2 bit sizes. Then you could have it, and at 100 you must have it. But as I said, at around 80, it hit us hard, and we're still paying the price. The last thing, really quickly, is corporate. That's basically legal. That is assigned to strictly the form of company you have, and especially there's a lot right now. Stock exchange, public companies in Poland. So there's a lot of legal stuff that it's not actually about B2B or agreements, etc. But there's an overhead on the fact that you need to create reports that adhere to the law, etc. So if you're a public company, so this is actually not very accurate in a sense that in a public company it's going to be probably occur much earlier, or the founder is going to suddenly handle that, which I know for a fact that from a lot of companies there's a lot of disgruntled board that they need to handle that. But that's just this last 11 tidbit, that there's something like corporate and it's not necessarily legal thing. Okay, to summarize. Top 3 mistakes that I made. when we scaled up from 4 to 150. I mentioned that I switched the middle management into top management too late and with too little preparation. There's a good book on this called Essential Drucker, and actually I remember going through the woods with a dog of one of my employees who was sick, doesn't matter, but I was walking in the woods with a dog, and Essential Drucker was on an audiobook, and he told me, well, if you already need top management and you didn't start training them a year later, you're in dipshit. And I'm like, fuck. So I'm warning you. Another thing is, I always understood the importance of cash flow. When you see any of my talks on any business talks that I gave, I always said that cash flow is king and that you always should be careful about it. The problem is that I started to use proper tools for it too late. So I had a gut feeling like, yeah, we have those 2 invoices coming in, and it should be okay. And then it's like, well, it's not, or hey, maybe we should do some risk assessment on that, etc. So the bigger you are, the impacts of those things are bigger. Like imagine you're 5 people and 3 of them are founders. So like 3/5 of the salaries can not be paid and it's going to be fine, right? When you're 130, when we don't pay free salaries, it doesn't mean shit. Right? So it gets scarier. So you need to use proper tools to anticipate problems. And the last thing that could be, it's separate talk in itself, is understood the importance of prioritization and self-management over hard work too late. I don't want to get into that too deep because I could talk on that topic for like 2 hours. But in a gist, in Poland especially, I think, but maybe it's a Western thing also, maybe it's also an American thing, is that we have this cult of working hard. Working hard is really good. Like I work 16 hours, like 16 hours. I crunch the shit out of this. We are hard workers. I gave my soul to that company. I don't give a shit. I want efficient hours. What did you do with that time? Give me 5 efficient hours over 16 hours of crunch every fucking day. We do not we never self-manage. We talk about production pipelines, we talk about things, etc., and then we go to coffees, and then we have meetings, and then we have calls, and then we're like, I'm sure that hands up, who was in a meeting or in a company who said, well, I can do the real work after 5 o'clock. After 5 o'clock, it quiets down in the office, and then I can do some work, some real work. Who had that problem? Exactly, right? You have shitty self-management, very shitty. So super important. I realized that around 2 years ago, and if I realized that 10 years ago, I think I would be a better person and Anshar Studio would be a better company. 3 things that worked really well is when I created a mission and stuck to it, magic happened. I think there were fallouts. Some people left the company because they, for example, didn't like the avenue. Like, for example, when we said, okay, we're going to do this, so we're going to use Unreal, some Unity developers left, right? Or when we said we're not going to do ports anymore because we're doing those full SKUs, some other people who were interested in that, like left, for example, for Pixelant, who work on ports, etc. So there's always a cost, but right now it's much easier for me to pitch the company in a sense that, hey, do you want to work on Anshar Studios? What do you do? And I can actually say something and not only straightly go, we will pay you more. And that's my only argument. Please, please, please come. So yeah, that was a good thing. Another thing is, if I could say one good thing about me, I'm a scary judge of talent. I have a very good recruitment streak the last couple of years. And I'm a patient guy. If somebody says, no, maybe in 2 years, I will fucking remember that. And come back, and I will get you. If I want you, I will get you. So if I think you're an awesome fit to our mission. And I know I said that was one of the mistakes that I understood it too late, but I freaking fucking understood it. And the last 2 years was amazing on that side, and it helped me gain family-work balance and solve some health issues, etc. So, and I think that I work much less because I don't crunch. I don't work like, I used to work 12 hours a day. Now I think I work like 9 hours a day and a couple hours on the weekend, but the founder can do it. So, but I do more. I shit you not, I do more, and I'm more efficient than I used to be. So I encourage you to explore the topic further. Okay, quick biography. I strongly recommend those 3 books, Radical Candor, None Lies About Work, and No Rules Rules. Although No Rules Rules, remember the meme from Star Trek about context? It's a Netflix CEO with shitload of money. That's a little, you know, you need to take it with a grain of salt, but still very good books. Obviously, Creativity Incorporated, Nonviolent Communication, Essential Drucker, and all those till Start With Why. Also good books, I recommend them. Start With Why, Extreme Ownership, don't read them, but there are very good ideas there. But just listen to those 250-minute videos, and the books are not worth reading. Start With Why, great TED Talk. Extreme Ownership, also great TED Talk. Don't read the books. Game Studio Leadership by Jesse Shell. It's also available online from GDC. And Forging Honor. I know the titles doesn't suggest it. Forging Honor, providing a coherent vision for a new IP. It's a shitty title. But it's actually about pitching the creative direction, which is very similar techniques to pitching a mission of a company. A really good talk. And thank you. We have a question. Are we?
What do you use for controlling? Because, like you said,
Power BI. Power BI. That's a Microsoft. Okay, but again, we're a little bit bigger company, so it is an overhead. Because actually, what we actually do is we hire a company on a retainer, a controlling company that does this for us for a couple thousand zlotys a month. And it's their license. I don't know even how much it costs, but it comes with the package of them handling it. And every month we have a meeting when they are given by our producers and our accounting, they're given all the data. So they have the timesheets, they have the budget, they have the spendings, they have everything, all the knowledge, and they compile it inside the BI. And I have access, I can look at it every time, which is awesome because I can look at, oh, this project is in red, this project is in red, this project is in green, this project is in green, this is my cost structure, like all kinds of information. For example, I can say that 76% of Anshar employees are men. We have a statistic like that in controlling, right? We use Power BI provided by an external company.
was it important for the company to understand the mission of your company, or it's just, you know, detached absolutely for once you do this, just controlling, money goes in and out?
I honestly don't understand the question.
Basically, if the company who does controlling for you, right?
They don't need to understand. No, they don't need to understand that. They compile the data. It's for you to interpret it.
Right.
So they don't need to know actually anything about the business. I mean, it's sometimes like, hey, why this project is, you know, below the line? Like, is it good? Maybe renegotiate with the client. I'm like, yeah, you know, but I don't know. We're doing it to portfolio or whatever. We have a rev share or whatever. But no, on the most part, they just crunch the data.
All right. Thank you.
There's a question there.
Hello, thanks. I would like to ask about outsourcing. I mean, for example, you said about DevOps, which is quite important recently for me. And
sorry, you said DevOps?
Yeah, DevOps, yes, because, you know, it's something like somebody have to set it up, and for example, for 1 month or 2 weeks, there is a need for a guy who works whole time, yeah? But after then, you know, everything is set up, and as you said, it's getting broke, okay, but still, it's like, okay, so we'll be keeping guy for full time, who will be doing like part-time job, and what then? And so I heard about maybe not outsourcing DevOps. I met such behavior, but it was very small and let's say that not the best company. And second thing I heard about outsourcing HR, And as for me, you said that 30 people company shouldn't have HR. I think it should have, because I saw what happens when it doesn't have HR.
But when you say, okay, so let's unpack that. The first question is obviously all those things, IT, DevOps, cleaning, handyman, etc. There is a point that it's not binary. There is a point where you require 0 of them, and suddenly it's not like you require 1, but you require some amount of work that you don't have. And it's a very shitty place to be, because it's like, with DevOps, I strongly believe that a person that comes in and set this up is then the best. It's super hard. The amount of maintenance is usually enormous from our perspective. Maybe we're shitty at it, but the cost of maintenance is enormous, right? So I would probably at first try to combine those jobs, like maybe IT in a small company, maybe IT and DevOps at the same time, but I would still make it a full-time job. But what we actually did, and we did that for the infrastructure, for the internet, for the security, etc., that we hired an external freelancer that came in and did it for us. The same when we set it up things with Windows, like the way we log in, the security, etc., and how we buy licenses. Actually, we also use an external help. I think we still do. Sorry, it's beyond me right now. So yeah, you can do that, but in my experience, as soon as somebody's starting doing fucking anything, suddenly it's like granted, like, yeah, we have this. So it comes to a full-time job very, very quickly. I don't know how it happens, but like when we hire somebody for like half-time, right? There's suddenly a super sucked need for that person to work full-time. That's magic. And second question was about HR. So that depends, because if you're talking about recruitment, employee branding, I agree. In a smaller company, you can outsource that. When it comes to business partner, no fucking way you cannot outsource that. You're not going to hire an external person that doesn't understand very deeply your company and your daily things and now try to solve problems of that company, right? So hiring and employee branding, I believe that yes, you could, and we also used help in that regard. But for being actually helpful to the employees, I think it should be an on-site person. Any more questions?
In fact, there is a question behind you, which is not mine, but it's similar. It's similar. I'm interested in, especially about training the right ones.
Yeah.
Training middle management. How to do it properly?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. We're just on the beginning of that road. I mean, a little bit less than a year ago, we started to have a training on communication and teamwork with the team of directors, and I see really good results on that one. But I think it's a beginning of the work. I think that the most important thing, and we try to communicate it. It doesn't work all the time, but it's not a permanent choice. You can try to do the job, and it's totally fine to say I'm not up for it, because there are people that have aptitude for that, or they like that, and they're really pumped about it. And there are people that are gaslighted by that, and it's a heavy burden for them. It's too much responsibility, or for example, they hate communicating. They seem like nice people who like that, but it's super hard on them. So one of the things that I think work well at Anshar is that we're totally fine with backing out, and there's no consequences. It's fine. You don't want to do that. Let's work on something else. Obviously, I mentioned that a couple of times, never promote your best specialists. Sometimes your best specialists are the best choice if they're also the best communicators in the field and they have the aptitude for that. So it sometimes happens, right? But I give you an example. I had 8 directors a year ago. No, not a year ago. 5 months ago. 5 months ago, I had 8 directors. Right now, I have 6. One decided that a lead position would be more suitable, and I fired the other one. So it's okay to make adjustments, right? But when it comes to training, honestly, this year was the first year that we tried to do something about it, and I'm not feel super comfortable to say, hey, we have these amazing programs for everybody. We're training our leads. I think that if you ask any lead here at Anshar how much help they got, I'm talking about middle management, how much help they had from Anshar Studios about how to develop as a lead, I think that they will be fucking angry right now. So yeah. Any more questions? Oh, and why you probably need more people in top middle management. How do you pick, hire, train? Okay, so I think I answered that. So yeah. Here? No, the microphone? No. Maybe we're out of time.
The question is, how did you manage to improve your self-management?
Oh, that's a very big topic. So I would start, and I think that that's the biggest hurdle. And if you mentally make that shift, then you can work on reading books, trying to iterate on stuff. I could tell you, like, for example, I wake up at 5 a.m. Because I do. I go to sleep at 10 a.m. 10 p.m. I go to sleep at 8 p.m. I have my morning routine, whatever. But every person is different, and every person should adjust according to their. But the most important thing to realize is there is an infinite amount of work. So you're not pushing the needle if you're working 16 or 8 hours a day. Doesn't actually matter because there is still more work to be done. So what you can do is you should find a sustainable way for you to work. That I can do this for my whole life and I won't fucking die, right? So how to optimize yourself. We are good at optimizing games, we're good at sometimes at optimizing processes, but we're very shitty about optimizing ourselves. So for example, can anybody answer, I know that my best hours a day where I'm most efficient are this and this? A question that if you can't answer that, you're shitty at self-management, right? Like, do you have time scheduled in your calendar just for work? Nobody's going to ask you for a meeting then, right? This is my deep task time, for example. If not, if you're going from a meeting to a meeting and start working at 5 o'clock, you're shitty at self-management. So you need to realize that the problem is not working more, it's working sustainably and better. And there's a ton of books on it, it's a ton of techniques on it, etc. And it's a very big topic. And I would make a speech about that, but I'm on a lot of boards. I mean, I'm on a board of Digital Dragons, I'm on a board of GIC, and I know how it would be received. It's like, oh, it's this weak, soft mumbo jumbo. We want to learn how to fucking make games. So yeah, maybe someday we're gonna grow enough as an industry, so I'll make a talk. Any more questions? There's one question. We're over time, so if you feel compelled to stay here because you don't want to be rude, don't be. You can just stand up and leave. But we're the last talk, so until they turn these mics off, I'm fine.
So I assume that a good deal of your growth occurred during the pandemic, with remote work involved, etc. Do you have a gut feeling that perhaps today's talk would differ in any way if this growth occurred in regular conditions?
I worked. Yeah, I understand. I worked for 2 weeks remotely. And then I thinking, okay, I'm going to die or I'm going to go back to the office, so I got back to the office. I have a kid, now 2, and my wife also worked. It wasn't sustainable. So long story short, I am not built for remote work. So yes, the fact that it was quiet at the office helped. But I wouldn't say that the pandemic was like the main initiator of that change, right?
That's not exactly what my question was about.
Okay.
It's about this layer of directors, communication, and making those decisions, which perhaps
I mean, now I understand the question, but it's hard to tell because we don't have like an engine that we can like, for example, we would need to turn back in time and start again without the pandemic, and then again turn back in time and start again without the 50 people growth. But my personal gut feeling is that the 50 people growth was the bigger factor. Because actually, when we, for example, started new projects, we asked people voluntarily. It wasn't mandatory, but hey, can you please come in to the office because we're starting a project or closing a project, and it's shitty to do that remotely. Then we made it mandatory at one point. So we're one of the few studios that said to everybody, come back to work, and they actually did because most of them already were there, right? So we like duped them. So in that sense, I don't think that, I mean, remote work definitely did not help with the communication issues, but I think that the scale was a bigger problem. Okay, thank you.